All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to episode number 24 of our discussions with the pros. Believe it or not, it has now been almost a year since the lockdown started. It's a little bit crazy. Herman, as I mentioned to you, we started these talks after Whiskey Week in Chicago was canceled last year. Okay. Whiskey Week, as you know, it's when Whiskey Fest is here. We have Benny's Big World of Whiskeys, a whole bunch of events, and many of the people on this call tonight are regulars who go to many of those events. And after they were canceled, we decided we needed to do something and get together and hang out and do stuff. So thank you for being a part of that. Welcome. And can you tell us where you're calling in from tonight, Herman?
I'm at my home in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is about 30 miles north of where the distillery is in Bristol, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, on the very east. The distillery, if you get on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and go east, the last exit before New Jersey, if you get off, we're right there. So we're right near the Delaware River, and we're in an old textile mill that was built about 120 years ago. Is now being converted to multi-use, and we're in a big part of that facility where the distillery is located.
Got it. And before I ask you the next question, I want to make sure that everybody heard that we're starting off with the Dad's Hat Pennsylvania Straight Rye. It's 47.5 ABV. That's 95 proof. Can you tell us why you wanted us to start with this one tonight, Herman?
Well, this is kind of our, it's a really nice straight whiskey. It's a very well balanced whiskey. And we by design, the way we keep the balance in this particular whiskey is that we have a vatting tank of about 6,000 liters. And into that tank, we empty our 53-gallon barrels that we select to provide a very nice balanced drink. So this is kind of a good everyday, it's kind of our middle of the road offering of straight whiskey. And we do it on purpose that way so that we never empty that tank, by the way. That tank, it goes anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 liters. The barrels go in, the bottles get filled, and it goes down to about halfway or 1/3, and then we put more barrels back in to maintain the balance. So this is kind of this is our middle of the road sort of a style we want to maintain over time with good balance. With the spice and a little bit of fruit and one of the characteristics of our whiskey too, and I think this demonstrates it pretty well, is the maltiness, because we have in the classic Pennsylvania style, we use 20% malt. There's a lot of people who say, well, it should be 100% rye. Well, back in the day, you couldn't make 100% rye. You needed to have malt, and mostly it was malted barley. Right. Used to provide the enzymes needed during the mashing process. And back in the day, 15% was about the minimum. We're at 20% total malt content and 80% grain. So
okay. And when you say the malt, so it is malted barley. Is that correct?
It's 15% malted barley and 5% malted rye.
Okay, and then the rest is rye.
Rye
the rest
grain.
Is unmalted rye grain. Okay.
Correct.
And where are you getting your rye from? I mean, Pennsylvania historically is a big rye state. Can you tell us a little bit about where you currently how you currently source your rye?
We have a relationship with a farmer, and in fact, if you later on you go to our website and you look for the video page menu, you'll find there's a video made about 2 years ago now, by Visit Bucks County, which is a local tourism group, and they got a videographer from National Geographic who shot some really great video, both of the distillery but also of the farm. And the farmer family we deal with, the Meese family, they are an original Penns Grant family. They've been growing rye on that land since 1716. What's great?
Wow, that's a long time.
and what's great about them is the current guy who's in charge, the young man is the current lead farmer, I guess, in the family. His name is Nevada Meese, and what's great about working with Nevada is that he's very high standards in terms of quality. The rye grain is grown. He leaves it in the ground until mid-July. A lot of rye producers have a tendency to harvest it young, but he leaves it so we get really mature, ripe rye berries. He He pays very close attention to how the crop is managed. He's also invested very heavily in the proper cleaning equipment. So when the rye is harvested, he's not using corn cleaners. He's using a cleaner specifically for a smaller grain rye. So we get a very clean product that also lasts quite well during the year when it's in a silo that was also specially designed to provide proper airflow. So we have a really high quality rye throughout the year from the farm.
Is he also doing the malting, or is the malt of
No,
that portion coming from somewhere else?
the rye malt we get from two sources. We started off because when we started, the only place we really had a choice was some of the larger commercial places like Breese in Wisconsin. And so we still get some of our rye malt from them. We get the rest of our rye malt from it's a new malter in Pennsylvania called Deer Creek. And Deer Creek Malting gets their rye, much of their rye, also from the same farm. So they actually buy it from Nevada and they malt it. And they're doing some barley as well. They're doing a lot of barley now. We're still buying our malt from Breese because the malt we chose when we designed our recipe it's not a 6-row malt. It's a 2-row brewer's malt, and it's a very flavorful one. And we're even though the guy Mark from Deer Creek will tell me that he can match the style we're getting from Breese, we're really hesitant to make a change because we do think it contributes a lot to the flavor, and we don't want to mess with that right now. So, but we're thinking of this year doing an all Pennsylvania malt, all Pennsylvania grain, and do like a special edition, that we'll put away and bring out later.
Got it. And obviously, you're using local water because Pennsylvania has very good water sources, I assume, where you are, correct?
That's an excellent point. Pennsylvania, just like Kentucky, is sitting on a bed of limestone, the Appalachian Mountains. And we tested the local water, which we use. And what we've done is in the design of our distillery is the water we use for mashing and cleaning is actually water that's been heated through, it's the water that we use in the condenser. So it's been heated and recycled. So we save water, we save energy, and the water gets heated so that any residual treatments or any chlorine that might be in there gets flashed off. So it's but the minerals stay. So we get a really ideal mineral content, and the water that we use is hot the next morning when we come in. We get even a 5,000-liter tank full of hot water ready to go.
And then in the second sample here, which is the bottled and bond. So bottled and bond, as we've already discussed here many times in prior interviews, it's aged a minimum of 4 years. It's 50%. It's 100 proof. Are there any other than the bottled and bond being at least 4 years and this being a little bit higher proof? Are the bottled and bond and the 95% straight rye, are they the same juice going in?
No. Okay. What we do with the as I mentioned before, the same juice going in, maybe, I guess it's the same mash bill, but the difference is that the 95 proof straight rye comes out of a big vatting tank where a lot of barrels are going in there, a lot of barrels mingling around, and theoretically, some of the first barrels we ever harvested, remnants of them are still in there because we never empty that tank. Bottle and bond, one of the provisions in bottle and bond is that all of the whiskey in that bottle had to have been distilled in the same season. So it all has to be coming from the same year. So that's why we have a release date on the bottle. The whiskey released in 2019 was from 2014. This whiskey is from 2015. 2015, yes. And we selected the barrels. What we're going to be doing, what we've done with the bottle and bond is that we try to select barrels that reflect a slightly different style. So I think you'll see that if you do a side by side with the 95 and the bottle and bond, the 95 is pretty balanced. It's not too, if you make your standard little diagram of different flavors, it's going to be pretty balanced across that spectrum. There's some fruit there's some malt. It's got the floral side and then the spicy side as well. the last year, the 2019 release, 2 years ago, for the Ball and Bond was a spice bomb. It's a really big spicy whiskey. So we decided to go with a different dimension this year. And the 2020 release, and we'll see if you guys agree, we chose the barrels for their more herbal and floral and grassy dimension than spicy.
Yeah, that's I was actually going to say that. The first one that I had, the 95 proof, the 47.5, it had more of a dry finish,
Right.
to it, a little bit more of a dry finish. Whereas the bottled in bond, to me, it seems to has a longer, sweeter aftertaste. Is what I'm getting from it. A little bit longer, a little bit sweeter. Both definitely rye, of course, but very, very interesting. It's no, I like them both very, very much. Can you tell us about your barrels? So you mentioned the barrels, obviously. That makes a huge difference when it comes to producing a bottled spirit.
That's the bottom line.
Right.
We almost for our almost all of our barrels come from the same cooperage. We were very fortunate to connect with them early on. It's a cooperage in Cuba, Missouri called McGinnis, and they supply barrels to Buffalo Trace and amongst other big guys. They've been in the business for a long time. They got really good wood. They typically air dry their wood for at least a year. On the 2019 release of our Ball and Bond was actually aged in barrels that were destined to be single barrels for Colonel Taylor, but we managed to get some off the back of the truck that didn't quite make it to there, and they are instead of air dry for a year, the wood is air dry for 3 years. So we've been trying to get a hold of more of those for McGinnis, but they're hard to get those. But the McGinnis family's been making barrels now for like 50 years. They use really great Missouri oak, and we're very fortunate to have a great relationship with them.
Are you charring the barrels at all, or are these uncharred, dried staves?
They come in charred. Our barrels, for our 53-gallon barrels are charred to a level 3.
Okay, and that's virgin oak, of course.
Yes, every time. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I got to tell you, the legs on this are incredible on the bottled and bond. I mean, it's coating the mouth. I love it. It's got a great mouthfeel. It's delicious stuff. Before we go on to more specifics about the whiskey, I do have a question for you, since we have people here from different parts of the country. Can you tell us in what states your products are currently available?
Yes, you could look at it in more detail on our website, but I'll give you a rundown. It's basically Massachusetts, south through New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, of course, Illinois, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas, Oklahoma, Washington, Oregon by special order, California, Nevada, Arizona. I think I got them all.
So that sounds like a little bit more than half of the country. So you've got some pretty good distribution.
Yeah, we were on the scene pretty early on, and we were the first guys making whiskey in Pennsylvania since the 1980s. So since 2013, when we really started selling, it's been we've managed to get into some states. Frankly, in some states we don't do that well because we don't have the resources to support them. Like a place like Georgia, I mean, we were approached by, well, actually in Arkansas too. Arkansas, we're actually doing quite well, but so we've been approached by some states to say, hey, could you come? We would like to distribute there, and we have to tell some of the places that as a smaller company, we just don't have the resources to provide the marketing support that a bigger company can provide. So in some states like Georgia, frankly, we don't do that well, but we keep a footprint there because we have some loyal customers there, and and a couple of the retailers there do pretty well for us.
Somebody just brought up a good question about Pennsylvania being such a pain in the ass with respect to how they get liquor in the hands of the consumer. As I mentioned to you before, I'm from Philadelphia, so I'm very familiar with the, the state system that we have there. And I remember moving out of Pennsylvania and just being shocked by what you could get in supermarkets in other states. Blew
Right.
me away. What's it, is it actually easier for you to get your stuff into the hands of consumers in other states than it is in Pennsylvania?
No. Pennsylvania is actually for us because look, when we've started this business, in 2006, there was an article in the New York Times that said rye whiskey was going to make a comeback because rye whiskey was almost dead. So in 2006, we started talking about it almost as a joke. When we got serious about it in 2009, I went to Harrisburg and talked to the people in charge of the state store system. They control 600 stores across the state. And I said, hey, nobody's making rye whiskey in Pennsylvania anymore. If we were to make rye whiskey in Pennsylvania, would you be interested in buying it? And they were like, look, if it sucks, it's not going to sell. We'll give it a shot. But if it's good and it sells, sure, we'd love to have a homegrown product. And they've been true to their word. I mean, we in the rye category, I don't know the figures from 2020, but in 2019, we were in dollars the number 3 rye whiskey in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So we're doing very well. We're in hundreds of stores in Pennsylvania.
And we're 1 and 2 not Pennsylvania producers. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, these are big buys. The big boys.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's wonderful. Congratulations. That's huge.
That's thank you. I mean, we're we have they have a great relationship with us. They support us very well. We do featured promotions with them. They carry products in Pennsylvania that we don't sell in other states. And in addition to that, what a lot of people don't know either is that Pennsylvania, loosened up our local laws to the point where, as a distillery, as a small distillery in Pennsylvania, I'm allowed to sell directly to consumers as much as they'll buy. I can sell it to them out the door in my distillery. I can ship to consumers in Pennsylvania. So we have an online store. If you go to our landing page on our website, you'll see it takes you to the store. And if you're from Pennsylvania, you can order direct from us. Nice. And there are things there that you have a taste of one of the products that's only available to Pennsylvania consumers normally. And that's the founder's selection of the third one we're going to taste.
Okay. And actually, why do we do that? That's a great segue. So everybody, if you could,
I didn't even get a chance to finish my ball and bond yet. Jeez.
You don't have to finish. I mean, we can come back to it. But, I'm trying to pace myself here. But
no, I understand.
And I have to be on for the interview. All right, I want to point something out to everybody here. Be careful with this next one. The Pennsylvania Straight Rye Single Barrel Cask number 9. Please note the ABV. Yes. ABV 64.6. Okay, that's 129.2 proof.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So you see, I haven't had that much to drink. I can still do the math.
You did the math very well. Very impressive.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. So tell us about this cask strength dram that we are about to taste.
Okay. We've been approached in the past by Binny's, but also by a lot of different stores around the country to do private barrel selections. And so John and I, what happens is we ship them out. And then the last time I did not the last time, but a recent time I did a call like this was with one of these stores, and they said, they said that we're going to taste that barrel. And I said, well, you know what? I shipped you all the bottles. I didn't even keep any for myself. So we've been shipping these things out. And we decided that in December, just before the holidays, we were going to select John Cooper, my business partner, and I, John is very important and influential in the tasting process. He has a great palate for blending. So he and I went through and we picked out a barrel that we thought was really great. And we said, okay, we're going to sell this one just to Pennsylvania. And oh, by the way, we're going to keep some bottles for ourselves for once. So this was a selection from 2015, so March of 2015, and was bottled in December. And we just thought this was a really nice representation of really the archetypical Pennsylvania rye.
I got to tell you, I'm loving this. I have not added water yet. This is delicious. This is rich. Now this has spice.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but also because of the heat, so the spice might be coming a little bit from the heat. I have not added water. I actually don't want to add water because I'm enjoying it so much. It
This
seems
is
to be
scary. This is
right,
scary. At the
right,
proof level, it is. But it's really delicious.
right. So then, and so the mash bill again in here is
It's the
pretty
same.
much it's the
Same.
same.
Yep.
Okay.
80% rye grain, 15% malted barley, a 2-row malted barley, 5% malted rye. And also, by the way, because one of the other rye producers out there makes a lot of their sweet mash process. Sweet mash was the typical way to do things in Pennsylvania for a long time, and we use the sweet mash as well.
I am loving this. And you're telling me that we can't get this in Illinois right now?
No,
Okay, well, I'm going to be in Philadelphia in about 3 weeks,
we
and
should. We hopefully will have some left by then. Now,
is it available? Is this stuff available at the state stores in Pennsylvania or not?
this
Or is
this
it?
particular one is not. This
Oh,
is
it's only up
only
at the distillery.
at the distillery, or I can ship it to any address in Pennsylvania. Oh.
Okay,
So
all
you
right.
can.
I'm thinking.
We don't care where the credit card comes from, but the shipping address has to be in Pennsylvania.
No, I understand. I might. My mother might end up getting a shipment of something that I have to pick up for her. So
Now, I don't know which states are which on the list, but we also have a single barrel that was released by, if you guys are familiar with Sealbox, sealbox.com.
I'm not, but a few people here like
Mhm.
Michael Nolan and Applebaum and Barrett might know Sealbox. I'm not familiar with them.
Sealbox is an online retailer that ships to many states. And the rules are so arcane that I don't even understand them. He's in DC. So DC is kind of the Wild West. So he can ship to a lot of states where I can't. So he's selling online. You could order it's a different single barrel. It's a quite different one. It's actually was one barrel left out of the 2019 bottle and bond launch. So it's a three-year air dry barrel with some rye that was at the time was harvested in Lancaster County. Really spicy, like screaming spicy.
Right.
Almost like
Unfortunately, Sealbox doesn't ship to Philly. We just found out somebody just posted that Sealbox doesn't ship to Illinois, unfortunately.
Okay, well, sorry about that.
That's okay. So let's get back to talking about whiskey here. So,
Okay.
all right. So, we've talked about your barrels. We talked about the grain, talked about the water. Can you talk a little bit about your distillery and your history? I read on your website that you actually grew up, above a pub. Okay. It was your family's pub, right? So you were living above the family's pub. So alcohol and the alcohol business is clearly, something that you've been brought up with. When did you decide that you wanted to actually become a producer of such a spirit, and how did that work for you?
Well, just to back it up just a little bit, my grandfather, when he was a young man in the teens, 100 years ago, was drinking rye whiskey made at the largest rye whiskey distillery in North America, which was located in my hometown.
Okay.
It was called the Gibson Distillery. It was a little town called Gibsonton, which was just next door to the town I grew up in. And my grandfather was working at the time in the Page's wire mill, in the still mill outside of in Monessen. And when Prohibition came along, he decided that lifting 350-pound bales of wire was a shitty way to make a living. So he decided to start a speakeasy. And my grandfather drank rye whiskey, and my dad drank rye whiskey until, well, my grandfather lived to be 95, and he was drinking rye whiskey till the very end. And so I sort of had rye whiskey in the brain. And by the way, my 8th grade science project was a still.
I love it. That's great.
I used fermented raisins, which is something in Greece that they call mastika, and that's what I made in 8th grade. And my dad, my grandpap, had a small still that they ran in the backyard. So I had a bit of an exposure that way.
Sure.
But I have a chemical engineering degree, and so I worked in like legitimate things for a long time. And in 2006, I mentioned there was an article in New York Times that mentioned that rye whiskey was poised to make a big comeback. So that's why we started talking about it amongst myself and John and some other friends. And in 2009, we got serious about it. We spent time at Michigan State University. Michigan State used to have a program called the Artisan Distillery Program,
Okay.
where we were actually able to test recipes on equipment it's like semi-scale equipment that were from a company from whom we eventually purchased our distillery. So we scaled up the process we developed at Michigan State with recipes that were based on old school Pennsylvania recipes that I've done a lot of research about. There's a guy who I credit with a lot of that research. He's a bit of he's a copy editor. He was, I think I'm not sure if he still is, copy editor at Whiskey Advocate, but he's a Pennsylvania guy.
Wait, you talking about Lou? Talking about Lou Bryson?
No, Lou Bryson was a writer there. There's
Right.
this guy, his name's Sam Kumlenik.
Okay.
And Sam, I met Sam on the internet, which my wife doesn't like me to say it that way, but I met Sam on the internet, and he turned out to be like the most knowledgeable person about Pennsylvania rye whiskey I've ever met. And
Okay.
I mean, he's got like recipes. There was an old distillery in his hometown called Dillinger's that was closed up, and he went in there and found abandoned a lot of their drawings and information in their file cabinets. Pardon me. Excuse me.
Got it. No. I got to tell you, this is. I don't know if you've noticed here in the chat. I almost shouldn't have mentioned that I'm going to Philadelphia in a few weeks because a whole bunch of people now are saying, Gil, you got to get me a bottle of that stuff. So you and I might be talking very, very soon about shipping some stuff to Cheltenham, Pennsylvania, because I'm going to be coming in, as I said, in a few weeks for a friend's daughter's bat mitzvah,
Okay.
and I'm going to be in the Philly area for a few days there. So let me tell you how I first met Dad's Hat. So there's a guy on here, Todd Coe. Todd and I, for about a decade now, have been hosting the craft whiskey table at a fundraiser for a local homeless shelter here in Chicago. And years ago, Brett Pontani from Binny's, with whom I'm personally friends with Brett, he and I always decide with one of our other friends what's going to be at this table. And Brett introduced me to your vermouth cask. Okay, now that's creative. I have not seen anybody else do a vermouth cask whiskey. So our fourth whiskey tonight is Pennsylvania rye whiskey, finished in vermouth barrels, 47 ABV, 94. So tell us about what we are going to drink and how this actually came about.
Well, it's a good story because I mentioned John Cooper, my business partner, who's also a big Scotch guy. And so we were talking one day that he would love to be able to do like a port barrel finish, something that's very typical of a Scotch barrel finish.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were looking around at what our options might be there. And at the same time, somebody brought us a bottle of vermouth from California. And for the most part, American vermouths, frankly, are not that good. And we were astonished at how good Via vermouth is. So someone gave us and when John and I were first starting out, we actually had more time available, and we used to do was it Every Town USA? Something like, is that what it is? The old thing from Seinfeld. We would put little a table and chairs out in front of the distillery, and light up a couple cigars and make Manhattans, and watch the trucks come in and out. And so we made Manhattans with that Via vermouth. And we loved it. And so John said, why don't we try to call these guys in California and see if we can get some of their barrels?
Sure.
And
why not?
Instead of doing a port barrel finish, let's do a vermouth barrel finish.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the genesis. It was born of a couple of Manhattans and a cigar in the front of the.
So this is the same mash bill. Okay, your same mash bill, right?
It's aged first.
Okay, so talk about the aging.
Yeah, it's aged. We have. I didn't include it tonight. We are sort of one of our flagships is something we call our classic rye. It's a 15-gallon barrel aged younger rye whiskey. Okay. And I didn't include it in tonight because we had so many things to go through. I figured I'd dive right into the older stuff. But it's a great everyday drinker. I use it all the time for cocktails. Mm-hmm. And so we take that whiskey after it's been aged in 15-gallon barrels.
Hmm.
and then we put it back into those used sweet vermouth barrels.
For how long?
It goes for anywhere between 9 months to a year in the 15s,
Hmm.
and anywhere from 3 to 6 and maybe more months in the vermouth barrels.
And how large are those vermouth barrels?
They're 60 gallons.
Okay, so you're taking vermouth, you're taking your rye that has been aged in smaller 15-gallon barrels, and
Correct.
you're taking a bunch of those and putting them together into the 60-gallon vermouth cask.
Correct.
Okay. This is, we're getting a lot of good comments here. This is delicious.
It's really good. It's delicious stuff. We and one of the things we do with this, like our both our classic and our straight, we have vatting tanks. So, like the first time we refill a barrel, a vermouth barrel, the result is so vermouthy that it's more vermouth than it's almost more vermouth than whiskey. So what we do is we dump those barrels and we put more whiskey back in again, and then we take that and blend it back with the more vermouth flavored stuff, so that after so we get first, second, and sometimes third fills that we blend together. So you get it. We want that to be whiskey first and vermouth second. We don't want it to be vermouth first.
Oh, it's a whiskey. I mean, there's no doubt that this is a whiskey.
Right.
And by the way, I should mention for at least definitely the Chicagoans that this is sometimes available on the shelves at Binny's.
Yes,
I've
this is
bought
available.
This at Binny's.
This is available in the Chicago area for sure. We just shipped them. We just shipped some to our distributor. Well, our distributor, by the way, in Illinois is BC Merchants.
Okay.
They're a smaller guy, but they do serve. They're in Binny's, and so if you're ever at your local store or restaurant, say, hey, if you want to get Dad's Hat in, call BC Merchants.
Got it. Now,
Brian. Yes, Brian. It's Brian. Yep.
Oh, there we go. And I love the fact that we have people on here who actually are professionals in the industry who know these people. So it's always fun when that's mentioned. So what I want to do right now, because I've got about 20 or 30 more questions I can ask. I'm going to ask you one other question before we open it up to everybody else. Can you tell us a little bit about how your distillery has held up during COVID? Obviously, tours are an issue and stuff like that. How have you all been doing during the COVID times, and what's your status?
We're fortunate in that a lot of the other small distilleries in Pennsylvania are very much destination oriented. They're tours a couple days a week, a lot of on-site sales and on-site cocktails, stuff like that. We were more distribution oriented, so we didn't get hit quite as hard, but it did hit us hard because in Pennsylvania, the state store system shut down completely for 2.5, 3 months, and they're our biggest customer. Okay, so we hit we decided that we had to do something. We had the right, even before COVID, to ship directly to Pennsylvania customers.
Right, you mentioned that.
We had not been doing that because basically we were available in 300 stores across the state. So, and also because if you've noticed, our bottles are very weird shape.
Yeah, unique. They're unique. I love them, by the way, because it's easy to fit them on my shelf. I like it.
Yes, yeah, but the problem is they don't fit into a lot of standard packaging. So shipping these bottles around I was afraid of it, and so we fortunately, and if you saw the package I shipped out to you guys, we found a company up in New York who makes these square tubes that are fantastic for our bottles. I mean, we have not had a single breakage issue with our bottles in almost a year. So we started off, and we said, okay, we got to do something. So someone told me if I went on a Square, the Square credit card thing, in 15 minutes I had an online store built on Square. We put it up on the website, we got the word out, and we were shipping literally pallets full of individual packages within days.
I mean, come on, think about it. Pennsylvania without the state stores.
State stores, people were like,
they were going nuts.
They were going batshit crazy. Absolutely. Right. So
I mean, the bridges over to Jersey were probably full of people going over there, bringing back liquor.
Yeah.
I don't know how that goes, but that's so. And it's obviously tours. Have you been able to start up tours again yet, or not?
Not yet. No, we're being pretty conservative. We're a very small team, and if we have a problem, and we have to shut down, we're screwed. I mean, we still have distribution business. So like this past week, we've shipped pallets to Pennsylvania, California, New Jersey, Tennessee. And if my whole team gets quarantined, I can't
Then you're
ship.
screwed. Yeah, then you're just done.
We're done. So
Yeah,
we've been, we've been, because the tours and stuff was a smaller part of our business. We're just going to be very careful with that. Now we're going to have the direct sales talked about have gone. They're not at the peak they were when the stores were closed. But what we've done there is that we are doing some unique things there. We're doing, the single barrel is only available on the website. We also sell something that it will be in our tasting rooms eventually, is bottled cocktails.
Oh, nice.
We have something, if you go on our website, you'll see we call them our pocket cocktails. They're 100 milliliter individual serving Manhattans, Old Fashions, Boulevardiers, and eventually we're going to do some others. But these are, they're not distribution yet, but these are TTB approved labels, the whole 9 yards. These are, and they're all first quality ingredients. We're using Via Vermouth. We're using, really high quality dried cherries in the Old Fashions.
Nice.
Stuff like that. And in the Boulevardiers, believe it or not, we're actually buying Campari to make those.
Well, what you're telling me now is that after this all ends, since I go back to Philly a few times a year, I'm going to have to take a little bit of a road trip up north from Philly. And there are other people on here who would do so the same. But as I mentioned, I don't want to monopolize all the questions here. And we seem to have a lot of people on here tonight, which is great. Eric, do you have any particular questions for Herman?
Yeah, you were mentioning earlier that your barrels are air dried for 1 year, but you got some that were aged 3 years.
Correct.
What difference are you seeing between the two ages of the barrels?
Well, it's funny because the whiskey that went into those barrels was partially selected and partially because that's what we had at the time. Was really very spicy. I mean, we put out a version of that whiskey aged in 15-gallon barrels back in 2015 that we called our sombrero blend. It was jalapeno peppers like you couldn't believe. And it was actually quite popular. We sold it at the distillery, but it was very spicy. And that's the whiskey that ended up in those air dry barrels, those 3-year air dry barrels. And for the first 3 or 4 years, it was still a kind of green and a little too spicy. But what happened is those older barrels, which have a more concentrated sweetness, eventually that sweet wood flavor took over. And like that whiskey now, if you get one of those bottles from Sealbox, it went from a jalapeno green to a red cherry pepper red, because and what happens with those barrels too is that they have a more concentrated vanilla side to them, so you get more of a vanilla side, more concentrated vanilla flavor out of those barrels.
Cool. So, Eric, why don't you give people direction on how they can ask questions? We have to be careful here because we have a lot of people. So, you tell people how you want to get this done.
Yeah, you can either raise your hand, or ideally raise your hand via Zoom, so it'll flag and pop you to the top. Or if nobody else has, William.
Yes, I was wondering, have you ever thought about finishing the rye in absinthe barrels? Because I had a Peerless rye that was finished in absinthe barrels. It was magical. It was awesome.
No, we haven't thought of that. I'm not sure where they got the barrels, but we'd have to.
They got them from Copper and Kings because they're in Louisville, it's down the street.
There you go. We could. We got a guy here in Philly making absinthe. We could talk to them. I haven't thought about that, but it's a good suggestion. I have to check it and see what that is. Was that a bourbon or a rye?
It was a rye, and
really?
Drammers bought a cask, and I think Binny's has a cask, and then they had a cask that was available at the distillery.
Okay.
And I've only had the distillery one, but it was amazing.
That's a good suggestion. I'll have to check it out because we have a guy, the folks who make Blue Coat Gin in Philly.
Oh, I know that guy. He comes to St. Louis for Gin Fest.
Yep. They make an absinthe that they sell locally here.
Awesome.
So check it out.
Look forward to it.
Thanks.
Josh? Oh, you got to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Really enjoyed tonight. Question for you. You mentioned adding 20% malt is the classic Pennsylvania style. Do you know when that tradition started and if there are other styles in other states that do that?
Well, it was born out of necessity because today, like if you're MGP, you could use 95% grain and 5% malt, and you just buy enzymes to make up the difference, because you need the enzymes from the malt or from an external source to convert the starch into sugar during the mashing process. And when you talk to the old school guys that I talked to when I was getting started, they would tell you that their old school rule of thumb was 15% malt was kind of what you needed as a minimum. These days, and frankly, the truth be told, even though we use 20% malt, we do throw a little extra enzymes in there because rye, as some of you may have heard, is notoriously nasty to work with if you don't do it right. And one of the issues is if you don't get good starch conversion and you don't convert all your starch to sugar, that the starch that remains in your mash unconverted is sticky and foamy, and it's a mess. So you try to get as much of that starch converted to sugar as possible. So it's kind of like belts and suspenders. We throw a little extra in there just to be sure that we get absolute good conversion of starch to sugar. But the 20% malt, not only does it deliver enzymes, but we chose a 2-row brewer's malt that delivers a lot of good flavor too. And particularly, and I'm almost sorry I didn't bring it, but our classic 90 proof rye, which is a very young whiskey, you'll find it's much like if you've had some of these new malts coming out of England, it's very much has that kind of that young malty dimension to it. And that comes from the fact that there you go.
Yeah, here you go. Yeah, I have a bottle. I told you, I love your stuff. I've been drinking your stuff for years.
Well, as you know, that's a very malty, it's a very malty whiskey. Because and we decided that with the help of the Michigan State folks to use that a very flavorful malt because it brings a lot of flavor to a young whiskey, but it also serves that purpose of bringing the enzymes needed for the mashing process.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Eric, who do we have next?
Paul.
How many questions do we want? Hello.
Hey, Paul.
Paul, we'll start off with 2. We'll see where it goes because
okay.
You're too quick because each of your questions usually has 4 parts.
Yes.
Sorry.
These don't though. Question number 1: what was Dad's hat? Bowler?
Oh no, it was a fedora.
Oh, perfect hat. Thank you. Question number 2.
I have several of them in the other room if you want to see them later.
I would love to do that for the after party.
I do wear my dad's hats. That's where it came from, by the way. So
that's fantastic. I love that part of the story. You said that your facility is an old textile mill, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Do you have a water mill associated with that? And do you plan on using, if you do, any thought about green energy?
No, not yet. Right now, our energy comes from it's a natural gas fired boiler. But one thing we do, and I mentioned before, is that all the hot water we use is captured off our condenser. So instead of just putting that hot water down the drain, we take that hot water, put it in the tank. So the next day we have almost 2,000 gallons of hot water that we use for cleaning the tanks and for mashing. And the fact that water has been flashed through that, it drives off any other residual flavors or gases, but the minerals stay. So it's a very good water source for us at the distillery.
Thank you. All right, I hit my first quota.
That's it? Oh, well.
Actually, no, Paul, you can ask another question. I know you have others.
On the topic of barrels then, I know the vermouth barrel is fantastic. This is very, very interesting, by the way. Thank you for that. Have you considered any Curacao barrels? Because the orange plays really well with the spice, or is there anything else that you have under consideration for a finishing?
That we haven't really gone exotic like Curacao. We've John's a little more traditional with his Scotch background, so we do a port as well. We do a port finish, which is also available in the Illinois market, and we use port barrels. We get away with it because they didn't look under the sheets, but basically the port barrels we use are actually California, not really port barrels. Also from Quaddy Winery. They make something, and they can't call it port, so they call it starboard, and that's the wine they make.
Nice.
We were looking at some other red wine type finishes. We tried some sherry casks, but we're finding that sherry and rye just do not work. I mean, I've had a couple of other people try it. We've tried it, and without good results. But something more exotic could be fun. I mean, like you said, something like the absinthe or curacao, maybe something like that. The only other thing we've been doing, and I didn't mention it tonight because it's not really available outside of Pennsylvania very much, is what we have a little thing we do where we take our 15-gallon barrels after the whiskey's been used, whiskey's been dumped out, and then we refill those barrels with either honey or maple syrup, and both locally sourced. And we let that maple syrup or honey sit there for several months. We take it back out again and we sell it locally. And then we put aged whiskey back in again. So it picks up just a kiss of the honey or maple syrup. So we've done some fun things like that, but we haven't done anything more with exotic, either, I don't even know where you would get a Curacao barrel, but something like that could be fun if we could get.
It's scary. As soon as you say something like that, I don't know where you get a Curacao barrel. There might be 3 or 4 people on here who are like thinking of raising their hands who would help you with that.
Well, I mean, I know some barrel guys, and we've been in touch with some barrel guys, but we haven't. John and I are maybe to our detriment, are a little too conservative. I mean, we're both old guys. We're 60s. We're 60-year-old guys. So, we probably should be a little more adventurous than we are. But I mean, the vermouth was one we thought we hit out of the park. I mean, we really think that's a great combination, and we found a great way to marry that into our whiskey. But you're right. I think we were starting to look at some new things last year. We're looking at Armagnac because I love Armagnac. John loves Syrahs, so we're looking at some Syrahs. But we kind of pulled back a little bit because of COVID. We were like, let's just be sure we get through this, because last April, May was like we had no idea what to expect. So now I think the waters are calm. We came through this okay. So I think it's maybe time to go out and have some more fun.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when a business is facing an uncertain time, what you need to do is focus on your core, which is exactly what you did. So, Eric, I see that. I see Todd is raising his hand. Okay, yep. Todd.
Yeah, Herman, I was going to ask you about that port barrel finish. I had a chance to try that a while ago and found it spectacular. I'm curious if you're using the same methodology you use for the vermouth barrels with the first fill, second fill, et cetera, and blending?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, because, a couple of the other port barrel finishes, the American port barrel finishes out there, I think are a little too heavy port. Again, we want it to be whiskey first, port second. So yes, we do the same thing. We've gone as far as 3 fills, because sometimes we get the barrels in and you open up the bung and you look inside and there's like a little bit of there's port sloshing around inside. It's so, and that first time it comes out, it's like forget about it. You would never. I would. We have to blend it. You have to blend it down. So.
Yeah, I had some other port finished ryes that just didn't quite play well together, and yours was really great. And when you mentioned that process with the vermouth, it kind of clicked. Like, I bet he's doing that for the port barrel too, because that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's funny, Todd. I'm thinking about upcoming shelter tasting tables and the amount of things that we've been learning throughout this year, and learning here from people like Herman, and how much more we're going to know when we host our next table. It's going to going to be a fun time.
We might get to do our own shopping instead of sending Brett.
Oh yeah, but then we might not get the discount that Brett gives us. We have to work with him. Eric, are there any other questions that we have here?
Not right now.
Okay.
Wait, Michael Nolan.
Oh, Nolan, go for it. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes. Herman, first off, thank you very much for this evening. It's always very educational. I just want to tell you that the single barrel was really phenomenal whiskey. Thank you.
I know I'm drinking more of it, by the way. So
yeah, I can't blame you because I'm saving a little bit here so my wife can try it. But I think Gil, we'll talk. We can't ship alcohol in and out of in and out of Illinois, but I sure ship a lot of olive oil. So
all right. So actually, Nolan, I'm going to interrupt us for 1 second. I'm putting my email address. Let's see, in the chat. Okay. And anybody who wants a bottle of the single barrel cask strength, please send me an email. I'll see how many responses I get. And then Herman, you and I will talk and I'll see if it's possible. Okay. If you want the single barrel, email me. And Nolan, back to your question, please.
Herman, what I wanted to ask is, it's been a tough year for everyone, and I'm glad you came through it. What going forward? It seems like we're kind of getting through this. What excites you about the next year?
A couple things. We have a lot of really good. As a craft guy, we started off with 15-gallon barrels. We've added the 53s, and we added more capacity in 2015, 16. So in 2015, 16, 17, we made a lot of really good whiskey, and those barrels are now maturing. And I'm really excited. Like John and I, what's today? Thursday. Thursday, John and I have we're going to arm ourselves with a basket or a bag of chocolate covered donuts, and we have to head up to the tasting room. Up to the fifth. We have a bunch of barrels up on the 5th floor, and we've got to taste through a bunch of 53s up there to see how they're coming along, because it's becoming daunting, because we try to do a very rigorous sampling of the different barrels coming down the pike, but as we expanded capacity and those barrels now reaching 4 years of age and older, it's a daunting task to find a right sampling to get a good representative sample of what's coming down the pike at us, because we don't want to add those barrels into our vatting tank until we've had a chance to screen them. Maybe not every one, but the ones that have been at least barreled together, and try to find ways of capturing that. But it's scary and really exciting, because we're going to get a chance to taste some really good whiskey, because one of the things that as a young whiskey maker compared to guys who've been in the business for a long time, I've now been distilling whiskey now for 9 years, but in years 2013, 2014, I was okay, I have a chemical engineering degree, I get all this background from Michigan State, but still, the cuts are made by taste, by smell, and the cuts that go into the big barrels are different than the cuts that go into the little barrels. And so I was very conservative in the early days, but as we got more experience into 2015, 2016, 2017, we got more, we were feeling more comfortable getting more aggressive in how we chose our cuts. So the flavorful cuts that went into those barrels in more recent years, in 2016, 2017, I'm really excited to see how that turned out. That is like, that's really exciting stuff for me, because we were maybe too conservative in the beginning, not wanting to make something that was, because if you've ever tasted like Scotch new make, okay, it's almost undrinkable. It's brutal, but in 18 years it's wonderful. Okay, but we don't have 18 years to wait. Okay, so we had to make something that in the beginning we knew that after 2 to 4 years would be good. But but we were able to start pushing the envelope in 2015, 2016, and beyond.
So when you do this, do you come across barrels that you say, this we need to push to the side and use it for a special project or a single barrel, or?
That is a big wrestling match we go through all the time, because with all the demand for single barrels, we have to be careful that we don't neglect our 95. Okay, this 95 proof one, and I mean, to be honest, I think the latest iterations of the 95 have suffered a little bit because of so many single barrels. Now the good news is that because we increased production 4 or 5 years ago, we've got more barrels to choose from. So, but we're very conscious of, like, we just dumped some barrels the other day from 2015 that were just, they were sisters to this single barrel. And we were like, we hate to lose you, but you gotta go take one for the team. And we put them into the big vat because they were so good, and we needed that flavor profile they provided, even though we would have loved to have bottled them as their own.
Got it. That's a great answer. That you know, on that note, I out of respect for your time, it is almost 8 o'clock here. So,
okay.
Well, what I'd like to do right now, if everybody could please unmute, and everybody, if you are so inclined, if you don't have anything in your glass, pour something into one of your glasses. I got to tell you, I'm going back to the cash strength, to the single barrel. I mean, this is delicious stuff.
Really
by the way, I've gotten a few questions here. How much do these bottles retail for, the single barrel?
The single barrel is
like $70 or something. It's like
something like that. Yeah,
$69.99.
$69.99. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's like $70. As I mentioned to everybody, I put my email address on here. If you want a barrel, if you want a bottle of it, send me an email, and then
I'll take a barrel.
You'll take a barrel. Yeah, send me an email. Herman and I will work on this. We'll see what we can do. In the meantime, everybody, please join me in raising a glass and saying cheers and thank you very much to our guest, Herman Mihalich.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Wait a minute. I saw a question. I saw a question about mass spectrometry. Mass spectrometer. Who put that up?
That was David Weil. David Weil is no, it was David. It's David, her husband. David, are you still on?
It was Naomi on behalf of her husband.
David and her husband.
Yeah, Herman. Yes, Herman. I do both LC and GC on flavor profiling with the whiskey, and so we have a lab in Chicago, but also we have one in Little Falls. And again, we do a lot of this with the wine industry, the beer industry, of course, but you know, getting together with distillers, like small ones, where we can take the single cask and then, just like you said, you're using different barrels, and look at how those is what we're talking about trying to do more of. And again,
well, if I may take a few more minutes, another or 30 seconds.
Let's take a few more. Yeah, that's fine with me. We'll take a few more minutes, and so we're going to keep recording for a few more minutes because that's a really good question. But then we'll cut it after this.
I used to work in the flavor and fragrance industry for a company called Hermanish, and I know some guys who are no longer at Hermanish, but with some other companies who do some GC work for me on the side. And and one of the areas we're doing that with is that we talked about this before the rest of you came on. We're doing some heirloom grain work that I initiated back almost 9 years ago, where we started off with 5 grams of grain, and we now have fields of it. And I've been doing some distillations and on a rather small still that was my grandpap's old still, which is not representative of what we could do. But what I'm trying to do is I'm taking a fat cut of new make off of there and having it looked at in GC to see if there's anything different from these different grain varietals versus what we typically use. And we are frankly seeing some things, particularly in the longer chain C, like C6, C8 range. And so we're pretty excited about that. And I'm pretty fortunate that some of my, like, I'm a chemical engineer, I'm not a chemist, but the guys I worked with were all like PhD chemists from MIT and stuff. So these guys are like mad, crazy scientists. And so they bring a lot of, and in addition, they have some of their flavorists are, if you've ever worked with a these flavorists and perfumers, they're friggin' scary. I mean, they'll pick this up and they'll taste it and they'll go and they'll tell you that's methyl ethyl ketone or something. They'll know oh, that's a whiskey lactone. So it's amazing to work with these guys and it's fun. And so we're trying to do more of that. I wish we had more money and time to do it, but so I'd be curious to know what kind of things are going on back there, because there are there's some bad work going on.
Herman, let me cut you for a second there. What I'll do is this. I have your email address and I have David's email address. I will put the two of you in touch with one another, because I know that if we start geeking out on the chemistry, there are a few other people who would get involved in this too. And boy, would we be getting into the weeds, where we're, it'd be going a little bit too far for us. So again, everybody, if you can just join me once again in saying thank you very much to Herman, and you were very generous in sharing wonderful whiskeys with us. Wonderful with your time. This was great. Thank you very, very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right.